What's up, marketers? Today I'm going to show you exactly how I'd build out a Facebook ad account from scratch that has a budget of $10K per month. And for the purpose of this video, I'm going to pretend like I'm working with an apparel brand. Fashion is an industry that I really love working in because there are so many cool things that you can do with the creative. With that said, this structure build out will work for nearly any type of e-commerce brand. This video is actually a part of a series that I'm doing for this channel, so if you like this kind of content, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below with the type of ad account and budget that you would like to see me build out next. Additionally, at the end of this video, I'm also going to talk about how I would approach testing your creatives and your audiences with an ad account of this size. So be sure to stay around for that. Now, take notes on what I am going to show you here, because this is exactly what I would do if I was working with an e-commerce brand that had a monthly budget of $10,000. Now, the first thing you're going to have to do is figure out your budget. And of course, we already know that the monthly budget for this ad account is $10,000, but the bigger question you have to ask yourself is how you want to distribute that between prospecting and retargeting. Now, the percentage ratio is going to depend on a number of factors, like how long you've been advertising, how old your pixel is, and even what your AOV is. For instance, if you're brand new to advertising and you have a new pixel, then you're probably going to want to front load most of your budget in prospecting so that you can build up your retargeting audiences. On the other hand, if you have quite a bit of pixel history or maybe even a high AOV product, which means that your customers are going to need more education in order to convert, then maybe you'd want to have a higher percentage in retargeting in that case. But in this situation, for a new brand in the apparel space, I would start off with 85% in prospecting and 15% in retargeting. And the way that that's going to shake down by the month, it's going to be $8,500 in prospecting, $1,500 in retargeting. In daily, that's going to look like $280 per day in prospecting and $50 per day in retargeting. Now, the reason why I want to start off my budget this way is because I know I'm going to have a much bigger percentage in prospecting so I can test new creatives and even a few audiences. But I still want to have a retargeting budget so that I can hit up those people who've engaged with me on social media or even been to the website. Now, once I figure out the budget distribution for a brand, that's when I start thinking about creative. And again, this is before I build out anything in the ads account. I want to make sure I know exactly what type of creative I'm going to run before that. And what I like to do is I like to check out Facebook ads library to see what my competitors are doing and even what other bigger brands in the industry are doing so that I can prioritize what type of content I should be testing first. And what I'm going to do at this stage is actually figure out what 6 types of ads I want to build and run first in my ad account. But I'm not going to tell you which ones I'm going to run yet until closer to the end of the movie. When I am going through the entire structure, that is when I'm going to show you what types of ads I chose for this account. So once we figured out our budget and determined what type of ad creative we're going to be running in the account, that's when we actually start the build out process. But first we need a plan. So at this stage, we already know that we're going to have prospecting and retargeting in our account. And the way that I'm going to be building this out is using the TOFU, MOFU, and BOFU structure. Now, TOFU stands for top of funnel. These are your cold prospecting audiences, people who've never engaged with your brand before. And then MOFU is middle of funnel. These are your warm audiences, people who've maybe interacted with your brand on social media or even been to your website once or twice. And then BOFU is bottom of funnel. These are your hot potential customers who are ready to convert. They've already indicated interest in a particular product by visiting the product page or even adding it to cart. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to build out this entire account, and then I'm going to take you through every single campaign and ad set to show you exactly how I've set everything up. Now, when we jump into the ad account, immediately you're going to see that we have 4 campaigns set up. We have TOFU conversions testing ABO, TOFU conversions scaling CBO, our MOFU campaign, and our BOFU. Now, really quick, I want to point out some of the naming conventions here. Now, TOFU and MOFU and BOFU I've already explained earlier. Those are just the different parts of the funnel that we're targeting. Now, conversions, those are going to be the objective type of the campaign that we're creating. So for both our TOFU and our MOFU campaigns, we're going to be creating conversion campaigns. Now for BOFU, this says DPA, which means dynamic product ads, which actually means that we're going to be using a catalog sales objective. Now, I don't actually know why all the agencies I've ever worked for don't say catalog sales. They just use DPA, probably because it's just showing us that we're using dynamic product ads in those campaigns. So that's why we have that there. Now, all of these campaigns are going to be optimizing for the purchase objective. Yes, even our top of funnel campaigns. Now, I have heard other advertisers say that they would rather use brand awareness, reach, or even traffic campaigns in the top of funnel. But I've actually found that I was able to get a ROAS and get purchases out of our top of funnel as long as you're using those conversion campaigns that are optimizing for purchase. Now, another thing that I've heard is that, maybe you'd want to start optimizing for review content or add to cart or even initiate checkout. And what's interesting is I've actually did a test here recently with a brand in their top of funnel prospecting, where we did a test using the purchase objective versus the initiate checkout objective. And this was a much newer brand. So I wanted to test this theory again about, having a new pixel and going right ahead and optimizing for purchase. And we actually found that the purchase one worked so much better. So that's what I continue to recommend, and that's what I would continue to recommend for all e-com brands, regardless really of what your budget is. Now, the difference between this testing and scaling campaigns right here for Tofu, when we hop into testing, now this is going to be for testing all of your creatives. Now, not only are you going to be conducting your creative tests here, but you're also going to be conducting, your tests on your primary text, your text on your headlines, or even your CTAs. Anything that has to do with the ad, you're going to want to test it in this specific campaign. And once you find winners coming out of this campaign, that's when you're going to start dripping those ads into your Tofu conversion scaling CBO campaign and even your middle of funnel campaign, so that both of these two campaigns are always going to be supplied with your best performing audiences. Now for Tofu scaling, when we hop in here, you're going to see that we have a few different audiences. We have a broad ad set. Now this is going to be targeting absolutely everyone on Facebook. You can put guardrails in terms of age or even gender if you need. Otherwise, I like having this just completely open. Additionally, here we're going to have a stacked lookalike audience. So in general, you want to use the lookalikes based on audiences that have actually purchased. So you want to use those purchaser lookalikes. But even if you don't have that, I would recommend using a stacked lookalike, which means that you would be making a lookalike that's based off your website visitors, your add to carters, even your social engagers, and of course those purchasers if you have them, to create a stacked lookalike. Now I find even in the early days, this is something that's really good to do so that you can just get a little bit more higher qualified traffic to your site. But I often find that these lookalike audiences, whether or not they're just single lookalikes or they're stacked lookalikes, they often tend to wear out and they're not as effective after advertising for a few months. Additionally, I still do a little bit of interest targeting, and right here I have an interest ad set that is targeting competitors, and this is going to be a stacked interest audience. So it's going to contain all of my competitors, whether or not they're direct competitors or just reach competitors. But yeah, this is still something that I like to do, even though I'm finding the best results these days coming out of broad. And I just find with iOS 14 looming, for some reason, I'm just getting a little bit more traction out of these interest audiences, which is pretty interesting and kind of unusual. Another thing that I want to note is that for, between this Tofu campaign, we're going to be using CBO for the scaling campaign. I tend to find that using CBO for scaling tends to work a lot better. Whereas with testing, I like using ad set budgeting so that I can make sure that these specific tests are getting the right amount of budget. So for this particular ad account, we have a $10K per month budget. And this is going to be working out to about $40 per day for these creative tests. Now, again, it depends on how much you want to test. You can, of course, increase this budget here to get out of the learning phase with these ad sets quicker. So that means you would be able to reduce this budget here with your scaling campaign. A lot of that is going to be up to you, but if you need like a definitive answer on that, I would say, start off with doing 2 creative tests, and you could do one that's that's based on your ad creative. So I have one that's right here for press ads that's doing different variants of press ads. And then I have another one here that's, doing a test on primary text. And these are all at $40 a day. It'll probably take about a week or two to actually get good learnings based off of those. So if you wanted to increase your budget there, you could, but I think that I would rather keep a bulk of that budget for scaling with particular ads that have already shown promise and have already done well. But again, if this is something that you're just launching right now, don't worry about having to start testing right out of the gate. I would go ahead and just put your first round of ads and all of these ad sets, including everything that's in your MoFu campaign as well. So actually just go ahead hopping into our MoFu campaign. You're going to see that I have two ad sets in here. One is for social engagers and one's for all your website visitors. And these look back windows are actually going as high up as they possibly can. I often like doing this the first time I step into account just because it's like a really easy win. Often after a month or two, if these results start weakening or the frequency is getting too low and there isn't enough room for scale or enough room in my budget, then maybe I'll bring this down to 90 days and bring this down to 90 days. It really just depends on what your results are ultimately. But even for some of my accounts, I just go ahead and leave it at 365 and 180 days. And then for our dynamic product ads campaign, now this is going to be an audience that is targeting people who've either viewed a specific product on your website, so that's view content, or added it to cart. And again, I'm going ahead and like letting that go up as high as it goes to 180 days, and the same thought process is going to be here. If you start seeing that your results are dwindling, you don't really have enough budget to increase it to keep up with that demand, then you can bring it down to something like 30 days, I think is most common for something like that. But I often find pretty easy wins just going right out of the gate and doing 180. So a quick word about the budget too, like this is going to end up spending $10K for the entire month. So we have our two retargeting campaigns, $50 a day. I just went ahead and split that in the middle. But after a few weeks, you're going to start to figure out really what campaign is doing the most and which one is like actually getting those better purchases from you, and you can start shifting that budget around or even increasing it. Something I would be sure to continue to look at is your frequency. If you start to see that your retargeting campaigns particular are getting a frequency that's above a 4 while looking back the last 7 days or more, then that's something that I would, it's a sign for you to decrease the budget. I mean, you could even shift it to more in the tofu campaigns. That's definitely a possibility. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is creative, and I'm actually going to be testing 6 ads right out of the gate for both my tofu conversion scaling CBO campaign and my MoFu campaign. Now, the reason why I'm using 6 ads is I've found that this is the optimal amount of ads to have in any given ad set. This is also what Facebook says, so maybe I'm biased, but that's generally the number of ads I like to keep in each of my ad sets as a rule of thumb. So the way that I'm going to be doing this is, if this is the first time that I'm launching this ad account, I'm going to go ahead and put these 6 particular ads into the tofu scaling campaign and the MoFu campaign. For the BoFu campaign, I'm just going to have 2 different ads running there. One that's for a carousel DPA and then one that's a single image DPA. Like I said, I really like running those for fashion brands because I often find that sometimes people just get hooked by the actual product shot, which is why I often like to keep that as a must for fashion. But for our other campaigns for tofu scaling and for MoFu, these are the 6 type of ads that I would use. Now, this first ad that I'm going to show you is an ad that I actually saw several months ago from Gucci. Now, the reason why I really like this ad is because it feels really organic. Actually, the first time I saw it, I thought it was one of my friends like showing the outfit that they were wearing, like their OOTD or something. But I actually think that this works really well, and it feels a lot like user-generated content. So this is something that wouldn't really take a big budget to produce ultimately, and I think would get really good results. And I know this is fitted for stories, but I would also be sure to fit it for the feed. The next type of ad that I would use is this one from Rent the Runway. Now, interesting fact, I've actually noticed that they've run several different types of this ad over the last few months. And again, something that I really like about it is that they're using user-generated content. It feels really organic, but they have this border around the side of it, so it elevates their brand, which I think is a really good option for luxury brands particularly. And I think that something like this feels a little bit like TikTok, not quite, but I really like it and think it probably does really well. Another type of ad that I'm going to be wanting to run in a fashion e-com brands account is sort of like these ads from Reformation. So what Reformation does really, really well is they do a good job of using copy and messaging directly across their videos and their images. Now, this is something that I've actually found to work really well across the board, and it's something that I wish that other brands would do a lot more. More and more I'm finding actually that by testing your primary text or your copy, I'm not getting as many wins there. I'm not like really seeing much improvement by investing my time testing there. But what I am seeing a lot of good return on is by testing the actual messaging that is in your ad. So that's something that's crucial to test, and doing these really simple ads like Reformation does and testing those different types of messaging would be an awesome first test to have actually in your testing campaign. Now, next up, I love these ads from Dagne Dover. Now, they really excel in doing these sort of IG stories type ads. And what's really cool about it is, again, it feels organic. I feel like I'm a broken record, but really the way that creative strategy and trends are moving in 2021 is people don't want to be feeling like they're marketed towards. They want to feel like it's a much more native and organic experience. And Dagne Dover does that in a way that feels like you're on Instagram stories, and it feels fun. It doesn't feel stuffy, even though it's a really well-known and high-quality brand. And next up is the brand Jing. Now, I think something that they're doing that's really awesome is they're really leaning into the TikTok trends, which is something that I've even had a lot of success with on my ads. And I think, again, a lot of it comes down to playing with the messaging directly on the ad type and leaning into those trends that TikTok uses, and it's highly engaging and it has these cool transitions, and I think it's awesome. That's definitely something that I'd be wanting to test in an apparel brand, and it's something that I'm testing in all my apparel brands now. Now, next up is some ads from Breda Watches. Now, this is actually a brand that targeted advertised me a few months ago, and I've never forgot it because every time I saw their ads, I thought, wow, that really just looks like one of my friends is taking videos of their watch to send to me. Again, feels really organic, feels really simple, but there is something that feels very luxurious about it, and I really like it. And I think that this type of ad is something that you can easily recreate without having to have a big budget, but by still making your brand feel super elevated. And as promised, the last thing that I want to talk about is how you should be approaching testing in this account structure. Now, this particular testing campaign is going to be testing for creatives only. So when you're testing new ad concepts, you'd be putting those tests in here. And really, when you find winners out of that, that's when you'd be dripping them to the scaling campaign as well as your retargeting campaign. You can also do your copy test here. Really, anything as it relates to the actual ad, that's what you should be testing in that campaign. And primarily, I'm going to be testing these particular ads and concepts with a completely broad audience. Really targeting everyone in the geographic area that you can specifically target. And the reason why I do this is because if you're targeting and testing with a broad audience, you're actually going to come out of that with the ads that have the biggest opportunity to scale. Now, when it comes to testing audiences, however, that's going to be going into your tofu scaling campaign. And this is actually something I've recently changed my mind on. So be sure to pay attention to this part. The reality is that in 2021, you're not going to be doing as much testing on your audiences. This is no longer a big lever that you can pull to get better performance on your Facebook ads. In fact, Facebook actually recently took away the audience insight tab. So this idea that you have to test through many audiences is really outdated for 2021, because again, you're going to have the most success on this platform if you invest in testing your creative as well as your landing page. So if you do want to test out different audiences, because I do find that changing those up every now and again does inject a lot of good juice and better performance into a campaign, but it's just never long term. Actually, I've noticed that like with iOS 14 looming, I've started testing a few more different interest stacks, and when I've done that, I've actually seen improved performance as opposed to some of my broad audiences. But what's interesting is those tend to not last as long, and then I always find, the first week or two, I put that interest audience into my scaling campaign. It'll get really great results for the first 2 weeks, way better than anything in broad, and then it'll die out after a few weeks. And this is really regardless of how big the audience size is. I think, it's just showing the algorithm a different way to approach the audience. You get some quick wins, but again, it's not sustainable. So that's why you're really, no matter what, going to have to put the bulk of your testing focus on your creative, since that's always going to be where your big wins are. And that's it. If you have any questions about this video or anything that I did for this particular ad account, please be sure to leave me a comment below and I will hit you up. I'm generally pretty active there. And that's it. I'll see you next week.